Welcome back to Powerhouse. I'm your host, Zeb Lowe. Today I'm joined by mortgage marketing powerhouse, Bri Lees. Bri and I are going to unpack how to make mortgage marketing that is authentic, effective, and, wait for it, compliant. There is a way to build a brand that feels human and differentiated while still respecting guidelines, approvals, and those shadowy figures who shall not be named, regulators. Bri has helped shape growth strategies across mortgage and fintech, and her frameworks are already being used by executive teams and field advisors across the industry. All right, Bri, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Zeb.
I had you come onto the podcast because we were going to talk about compliant marketing, and fun is not necessarily correlating to compliance most of the time in most people's minds, but that is a major obstacle. I think that not just most marketing departments feel, but also loan originators on the ground wanting to get their hands on good, effective, authentic marketing. So when you look across mortgage companies today, what do you see as the real problem behind weak marketing, poor adoption, and compliance friction?
That's a good question, because I think a lot of us look at marketing and see it as the fun, exciting thing when really there's a lot of strategy involved. And one of the biggest bottlenecks that I see is like a company that I recently audited where they thought they were being super compliant, they were doing the right thing. But when it actually came to their marketing, everything that they were putting out there was so boring. And the reason why it was boring was because they never really decided what they stood for in compliance. Like loan officers were really willing to be up in the air with whatever we're posting. Like they're not going to be getting a fine, but the company wanted to be really, really safe. And so that's one of the biggest bottlenecks that I see is like, what do you stand for? And are your loan officers on the same page with that?
You would say that's a leadership issue, right?
Absolutely. It all dials back to a leadership issue, because at the end of the day, if your leadership team doesn't know what you stand for, what are you supposed to do? I think that's something that's consistent across the industry. I audited I audited a company, and they were launching a new awards program. And when I launched the new awards program with them, one of the first things that I did was like, let's check out and see if any of your competitors have something similar or what they're doing, right? And come to find out that their competitor had the same exact name for one of their programs that they were launching for that same exact program on the certifications. And they didn't take the due diligence to actually understand, is anybody else doing this? And when I presented it, the thing that came up was, well, we've been doing this for 5 years. We don't care if anybody else is. And it wasn't so much an issue of, somebody else is doing it. The issue was more so the ego that was involved in making that decision and the failure that meant if they were to say no, because they had been doing it for such a long time. Like, what are the implications for everybody else if they're to say no? They're not going to keep doing this thing because a competitor is doing it.
Yeah. And from my experience, I've got quite a few years of, seeing how the sausage gets made from a marketing perspective, and then working with compliance, leadership issues. And it's an evolution, or maybe like a devolution, I guess, in a company. There's a ripple effect that happens. And so from your experience, what happens when leadership, it all starts like what you talked about earlier, like defining what the company actually stands for, right? And so when leadership avoids doing that, what begins to happen? Like what stages, or what does that ripple effect look like from your experience?
The ripple effect is that what leadership thinks it stands for is what the field stands for and top producers stand for. And that can change by the snap of a finger, right? If your leadership team at the end of the day is completely, bowing down to whatever loan officers want to do or say, what you stand for is going to fluctuate too. So a really great example is like going back to the story that I told earlier. Like I see that consistently across companies that I audit where they don't know what they stand for, and maybe they decide what they stand for, right? So, and then what happens is a loan officer will say, I don't like this, and it's a top producer. And then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, we're not sure if we like this either, because the top producer isn't sure. So it's so important that that leadership team collectively decides, hey, we are really willing to be risky when it comes to 2-in-1 buy downs or X, Y, and Z, but we're not willing to take a risk in these states. Like, for example, New York is a state that really a lot of people have troubles with. And sitting down and deciding what that is, because if your leadership team doesn't know what they stand for, compliance doesn't know what you stand for, marketing doesn't know what you stand for, and it's all going to end up in the hands of loan officers. And then you have a company that's running by loan officers, as most of us do in the industry, and as I often see.
Yeah, you're giving me flashbacks of
do you have PTSD right now?
Yeah, a little bit, where there would be quite a bit of effort and resources spent on any given marketing strategy or, I don't know, suite of assets or whatever. And then one top producer out of the top 10 said that they weren't going to use it. And then just all hands go up and, everything is abandoned. And I think that, again, this could be anecdotal. I'd like to hear your perspective on this. From my experience, that when leadership, when they don't make those calls, a lot of times compliance doesn't have much of a choice but to kind of step in and fill the vacuum from a marketing perspective, because it's always better to err on the side of like, let's not get fined. And so how do you view that shift in the changing role in compliance and the way that teams should experience?
Sure. I mean, compliance right now, think about it. If you're, CEO listening to this call, if you're a compliance department, or if you're in marketing and you're listening to this podcast, who's really making the decision? Most of the time it is compliance, like you said, but is that the right call? My answer would be no, because compliance is just following the rules. And if you say to somebody in compliance, like, you get to make the call, of course they are going to make the safest decision. Like, their job is to protect the company. What I found to be really successful is when marketing and compliance partner together and then go to the leadership team and say, we're really willing to walk the line on these issues. Like, everybody has, if you're an IMB, we all have the same exact rules. They're all, again, they haven't changed for 10 years. So you have to decide, where are you willing to be lenient on it? And can you partner as a marketing department with compliance? And I believe that the most success will come when marketing gets the final decision. Compliance gets to put those guardrails in place and say, these are things we can't budge on. If we're creating a marketing asset, we absolutely need these disclaimers. We cannot say this, and every state is different. But those rules haven't changed in so long. It's really about building the right framework, as opposed to just saying, this is what we stand for and what we don't. It's putting like puzzle pieces together. And that's when the most success is going to be seen. And I've seen that time and time again with audits that I've done, or working with fractional clients too.
So for the clients where it's actually working from a structural perspective, like what do those guardrails look like, from the inception of like the marketing strategy, through working with compliance, to testing it in the field with the LOs, or receiving LO feedback? At what point do they receive LO feedback from a structural perspective and a process perspective, I guess? What does that look like?
From a process perspective, the first thing that you should always be doing is sitting down with the compliance department, with marketing, with leadership, and deciding, we either are going to be really safe and nobody's going to care about our marketing, or we're willing to teeter the line a little bit on these topics, or walk the line where we're pretty safe, but there might be a little bit of a gray area here. And that first meeting is really where you decide what risk factor you're willing to take. And then from there, you need buy-in from the field. You need the buy-in from loan officers. You can't just, we've seen this time and time with adoption, like, you can't just say, this is what we're doing, loan officers, this is what you're going to do now. No, like, they need to feel like they're part of that process. Otherwise, there is going to be rebellion, and there is going to be the Wild West and people going completely rogue. So once you have the buy-in from your leadership team and your executive team, as well as compliance, next step is buy-in from the actual loan officers. Once you have that, and maybe you have a beta test that you're going to, pilot in a few different states, then start actually building that framework and what that looks like. So instead of templates and assets, which is what most companies do, most companies say, here's your flyer, here's your social post. Instead of doing that, give them framework that they can work within to create the content that they want. So whether that is, some kind of program that you have at your company, or let's say, it's like no down payment, whatever it might be, build the framework so they know that they can do this, but this is the compliance disclaimer that they need on it. This is what they can't say, and give the flexibility. It's almost like locking down certain parts of it and keeping other parts of it flexible.
Yeah, I think like failure to do that, you talk about, is vanilla. I think that's a phrase that you used in the past. Like, that's how marketing becomes vanilla. So you spoke a little bit to this in that last answer, like what LOs end up doing. But so when when the content makes their way to the LOs, what does that look like? The vanilla marketing, I guess, the vanilla content. What does that look like, right? And I think you mentioned kind of two camps, like the LOs just kind of ignore it, don't use it, or kind of go rogue and do their own thing, which is largely probably not compliant or definitely wandering in more dangerous area. From your experience, what does that look like?
Look, I've done this the right way and I've done this the wrong way. And when I say that, I mean, I have tried to come into a company that I worked with and said, this isn't working. We can't do this. Let's build this whole thing and just hope loan officers do it. And what I learned through that experience is you cannot tell a loan officer what to do because they firmly believe that it's them against corporate and that this is their business, which it is, right? Marketing is an item on their P&L. It's a line item. And so to make it work effectively, you have to understand that you don't want to control them. You have to give them autonomy. By them, I mean loan officers. You have to give them autonomy. But at the same time, you need to put a framework in place with how to do that thing. And what that really looks like is setting them up for success with templates, with words that they can say, and also training. You can't just give a loan officer new content and say, go figure this out. You have to be willing to sit with them one-on-one and understand their problems, sit with them and understand why are they afraid of implementing this. I think every loan officer wants to know what's going to change, but they also want to do what they're comfortable with. Like nobody wants big change. So for a company to all of a sudden say, you can't do this, this is what you have to do. That's a hard thing. Like someone in Phoenix wants a pineapple on their social media flyer, somebody else doesn't, that's compliant, sure. But when it comes to really getting into the nitty gritty of things, that's kind of where you have to decide.
I think this would probably be a good place to talk about building a brand, particularly on social. So I know it's a cliched phrase at this point, because of like being a brand now means a million different things to different people. So I know that's, one of your rallying cries though. To you, what does it mean to actually, or can you define what a brand is for an LO?
Yeah, I'm just recently coming back from MBA IMB, and one of the speakers, he was keynote speaker, was there, gave really good advice about how to build a brand. But one thing that he said was, if you're a loan officer, you can go to ChatGPT, type in I'm a loan officer, where I'm located, and it'll spit out 30 prompts. That's the worst thing you can do because you just commoditize yourself in an industry where everybody else is exactly the same. So when it comes to building a brand, it isn't just what you're willing to say, what you look like, what you stand for. It's so much more than that. It's really, why do people work with you? Like if there are loan officers all over the country and you're at a company where they can go work with anybody, why would they work with you? So are you somebody that's focused on partnerships? Are you focused on, your client? Are you focused on all of the things? You have to understand what's important to you. And that is not just, I have been in the business for 25 years and I have helped thousands of families. That is saying, this is why I'm different and how. The programs that I put in place that I see the most success with are when there's frameworks to help an LO build their brand, go through the process of understanding what's their value proposition. What do they stand for? What do they not do? How do they help people? But again, you have to recognize that everybody in the country is doing those same exact things. So that's where it's so important to put it in place.
Let's play out a hypothetical situation, which is probably, I guess, it's part hypothetical and part true, because you and I have had conversations previously where you've kind of hammered on me really for not being my own brand or not building a brand, which is kind of weird for a guy that is hosting a podcast, admittedly. But I naturally have a skepticism of people that are overly promotional, and the idea of building a brand for myself just it feels vain, I guess, and kind of exploitative. I've talked to you about this. I don't want to take things that I do for people the time that when people talk about building a brand, they're taking pictures with their kids at the park, that's because this is who I am authentically. I don't want to take the things like that or the service to the people, my service to people in the industry and my community, and cheapen them or exploit them. And I'm not judging anyone that does those things by any means. It just runs contrary to my nature. And I know a lot of folks like me. And the rub, I think, is that my brand needs to be authentic, right? It needs to be human, it needs to be who I am. So if I know that I need to build a brand because I have to in order to be successful or more successful, but doing so is contrary to who I authentically am, like what do I do? It's kind of like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And like I said, a lot of people out there like me. So like you tell me what to do, like build my brand. How would someone like myself build my brand?
Zeb, I don't like being perceived either. I hate social media. I'm not on it except for work. And so I'm in the same exact boat as you, where I don't want to post pictures of my kids. But people want to know who you are. If you want to make a name for yourself, you're doing yourself a disservice to not be posting about it, to not be building a brand. Because if you don't decide who you are, everybody else is going to. Like, people make assumptions about what that looks like. So the first thing I would really do is sit down and answer the core questions of what do you want to be known for? Outside of just having a podcast, what are the things about you that people need to know? And there's like a framework that you can put in place with that. You know, who are you? Not just like on a title level, but what are the things that you're willing to give up when it comes to the personal side of you? Like for me, for example, I'm willing to say that I like chicken tenders and that I hate conferences. And that's something that resonates with people because there's a lot of people who don't like conferences. But then for you, you know, looking at it, when you walk through that process, it's looking at the awareness level. How do you get people to be interested in what you have to say and stay with what you have to say, and then eventually listen to your podcast? So if I were you, or if I were a loan officer listening to this, the first thing I would do is really sit down and understand, look at content, like what resonates with you. Is it a post? Is it a video? And then from there, start building out that framework. You know, there's yes and no questions that you can do, and there's different like brand building exercises that you can do. But I think it all boils down to, outside of what you offer that everybody else has to offer, what makes you different.
That was going to be a follow-up question, not for me necessarily, but just in general. Like, how does someone differentiate? Because there's quality that's involved as well. Like, what is like brand level quality, I guess you could say, versus like the filler, the fluff, like I'm doing this just to do it type content. And would you say that that's sitting down, looking at whatever you're posting or whatever you're creating through that filter?
I would create a list of 5 pillars that you are really passionate about. And within those 5 pillars that you're passionate about and that align with your brand, those are the things that you always go back to and you always talk about. So for me, I have my list of 5, but do you have your list of 5? And that's not just like on a broad level podcast, but what are the specific topics that you're really passionate about that you could talk about all day long? Because you'd never want to be in a position where you're just posting to post. I personally, like, I will never post a post. And I advocate for my clients all the time, like, don't just post a post to put it out there, because that's not going to feel genuine to you or to your audience either. If it just feels like checking a box, it's a waste of time. And that's so often what I see, is that people are just putting out content that could be anybody else. If you take the logo off, if you take the headshot off, it could be anybody else that's doing that. So the most success that I found is dialing into, these are my 5 topics. This is what I'm constantly willing to talk about. Does this post go back to one of these 5 topics?
What are your 5 topics?
My 5 topics: burning down the flyer department, talking about conferences and visibility, talking about brand strategy, specifically executive team visibility, and then the last one being compliance. So anything that I post goes back to those things.
Yeah, I know you got a real beef with flyers on the Flyer Factory. I've seen.
Burn it down.
Yeah. All right. So another topic that I wanted to talk to you about, which kind of underlies everything that we discussed so far, is working with the LOs or managing expectations of the LOs. Talking to LOs about, marketing is not necessarily a win-lose game. It's a constant, it's an evolving testing strategy, basically, right? So it's just always evolving, getting better, testing out what works, what doesn't work. And like you were talking about earlier, like loan originators, that's their business, right? And so there's a understandable like resistance to kind of being tested on, right? Because that could, easily you could have the perception that you're messing with my business or my lead gen or, any number of factors. And as we discussed earlier, like initiatives can die because one influential loan originator just doesn't like what the company is doing. How would you advise leadership to think about balancing that top producer influence with long-term health of the brand, with testing strategies, and like understanding that some initiatives actually do fail, and then getting loan originators, especially top producers, to roll with an evolving strategy? And again, some things just don't work.
Some things don't work, but one thing that always is consistent is that your brand belongs to whoever leadership is afraid to lose. If that's a top producer, they're afraid to lose them. Or if that's somebody on the executive team, they're afraid to lose them. They're never afraid to lose marketing, right? And so when you're a marketing team trying to align with an executive or loan officers, you have to understand that like somebody could replace you at any point in time, and it's all relationship based. It's understanding. It's coming from their perspective and sitting in their shoes. If your company has 500 loan officers, there are 500 opinions. So everybody has a different perspective. How do you appease everybody? And what I found to be really successful in that process, and I would give anybody advice to do if you're sitting in a marketing team, is looking at it from that perspective is like, is this an initiative that we're just checking off to do it because we think it's going to be really successful? Or are there actually going to be leads coming from this or brand awareness coming from this? And if there is an outcome and a KPI that's coming from it, then that's what you need to share with the field team, because they want to see success too. Like loan officers don't just want to do something because corporate is telling them to. But if you're saying you're going to generate more leads from this activity, let me show you, let's A/B test it. Let's do an A/B test, one, the way that you're already doing it, and then B, the way that I'm suggesting you do it, and help them see that outcome. You need to have buy-in in order to make any change at a company. And in order to make change, you have to show the results before you can really fully take over. And that's the route that I would take, is instead of forcing anything, I would get the buy-in, because I've tried the forceful way and it doesn't work.
So zooming all the way out, let's say, so if mortgage leaders fixed just one thing tomorrow to make better marketing, stronger strategies, healthier relationships with compliance, what's the one thing that you could or would advise people to enact change?
I would set up a risk tolerance document. Define in writing what you will and won't say as a company, where you're willing to take risk, because that will deter the complete success of your marketing department. That's going to determine whether your content is really vanilla and if that could be replaced with any other company, or if you're going to be the company that's challenging the status quo and creating something new and successful. I just recently did this with a company, and we launched, they had one brand, but we gave their loan officers flexibility to have multiple brands under their umbrella that looked different. By that, I mean it had different colors, different fonts and typography, different kind of catchphrases. And a loan officer who joined the company could come in and build it and say, like, I really like these things and I hate these things. Because otherwise you're in a situation where everybody hates everything, or you're willing to accommodate everybody just to make a top producer happy. So to go back to your question of what would I do, I would create that risk tolerance document with what are we willing to take a risk on, both on the compliance side, but also the company side. That is going to determine your success and also help marketing not get killed by just really vague rejections.
All right, well, Bri, thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure.